Well, Batman, I haven't seen you here in a while. I was kind of worried you had given up on the superhero business.
Not entirely, Spider-Man. I'm just a different kind of superhero now. Being Pope has a lot of responsibilities and duties. To be honest, it's a lot harder now than defending Gotham ever was. Sometimes I miss the classic superhero work, but it's great to be a part of this astonishingly ancient and breathtakingly beautiful church filled with tradition, truth, and the Word of God. It's hard to think it's been almost 2,000 years since Jesus first instated St. Peter as the Pope.
I'm sure it is, but are you sure Jesus ever even instated a pope?
Of course, being the world's greatest detective, I looked into it a lot myself. You see, way back when Jesus was on Earth, he told St. Peter,
"You are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades shall not overpower it."
Peter means rock. It's a name within a name. So, using only the most basic explanation, St. Peter was the rock the Catholic Church was founded on.
Yeah, I've heard bits and pieces of that before, but I've also heard quite a few objections to it. I've never really been sure who to believe.
Well, Spider-Man, it's a common objection that the Greek terms used in this case are Petros for St. Peter and Petra for the rock the church is going to be built on.
Yeah, that was one of them.
They say that Petra refers to a giant rock, and Petros refers to a little stone or a tiny pebble. But if you think about it, Jesus wasn't speaking Greek. He spoke Aramaic. In Aramaic, the word for rock is Kepha, and that would have been used for both Petra and Petros. You can see this later in the New Testament when Peter is referred to as Cephas, the Greek rendering of Kepha.
But when they were writing in Greek, why would they use Petra and Petros in the first place?
The definition distinction between Petra and Petros didn't exist until later. They didn't change the meaning when they translated it. Petros is the exact same word with a masculine ending instead of feminine one. That same suffix was added to the Aramaic word Kepha. That's why we get Cephas instead of Kepha. It wouldn't be right to call Peter Petra. That'd be like calling him Patricia. Oh my gosh, that'd be hysterical.
I'm starting to remember a bit from Bible school at the Xavier Academy. Wasn't Jesus referring to Peter's confession as the rock the church would be built on?
That's the most common non-Catholic interpretation, but it doesn't really hold much water. Jesus had already changed subjects and was talking about Peter at that point, as evidenced by the rest of the verse. Besides, it doesn't say anything about his confession being a rock, whereas in the same sentence, he calls Peter the rock.
Yeah, I guess you're right. But there has to be more than one verse talking about Peter being Pope.
Oh yes, why of course there is. Later in the same chapter, Jesus gives Peter the keys to the kingdom, saying,
"I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth shall have been bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall have been loosed in heaven."
Interesting. But what exactly does that mean?
Well, binding and loosing is Jewish terminology. Bind something was to prohibit it indisputably. To loose something was to make it indisputably lawful. In the Old Testament, the Jewish rabbi held this power. Interestingly enough, Jesus gave it to all the disciples, but he gave it to Peter first.
That is interesting. But what about the keys?
In the Davidic kingdom, the keys were given to the second command or prime minister. This historic tradition is talked about briefly in Isaiah 22:22.
"He will be a father to those who live in Jerusalem, and to the house of Judah. I will place on his shoulder the key to the house of David. What he opens no one can shut, and what he shuts no one can open. I will drive him like a peg into a firm place. He will be a seat of honor for the house of his father."
So when Peter was given the keys, he was receiving the position of prime minister in the new Davidic kingdom. That certainly sounds like a position of authority to me.
Wow, I've never heard all of that. But isn't the Pope just the Bishop of Rome? I've heard that Peter wasn't ever even in Rome.
Well, whether or not he was in Rome is inconsequential to whether or not he can be Pope, actually.
Well, I guess so, but it wouldn't make much sense.
No, maybe not. But there's more evidence pointing to him having been in Rome than evidence against it. In 1 Peter 5:13, Peter is writing from Babylon, which was used as a code word for Rome in the early church.
But I've heard Babylon wasn't used as a code word until later.
Well, probably never will know for sure, but there's still a lot more evidence pointing to him having been in Rome than evidence against him having been in Rome. I mean, him being in Rome is the most logical explanation for him using the code word Babylon.
Yeah.
On top of that, in the 1st century, St. Clement of Rome wrote that St. Peter and St. Paul were martyred together in Rome. Archaeologically, it's widely held that St. Peter is buried in Rome under St. Peter's Basilica. In fact, even most honest and educated non-Catholic scholars agree that St. Peter was in Rome, died in Rome, and is buried in Rome. That's a lot of Rome.
Yeah, I guess it'd be kind of unreasonable to believe St. Peter was never in Rome.
Yeah, you can also see St. Peter's authority in the Council of Jerusalem.
I thought people said that proved Peter wasn't Pope.
Well, some people think so. They say that because St. James made the concluding remarks, he has more authority than Peter. But it was St. Peter that made the official decision on the matter, silencing any dissension. After that, St. James made some closing remarks, mostly because the issue pertained to his diocese more than anyone else's.
Oh, well, I've never thought about it like that.
Yeah, also consider that St. Peter was mentioned over 190 times in the Bible. That's over twice as much as all the other apostles combined.
Wow, that is a lot.
You bet it is. It's also interesting to consider that St. Peter is called Peter Bar Jonah, or son of Jonah. We know from elsewhere in the Bible that Peter's father's name is actually John. It's believed that St. Peter's father was either known by two names, or Jonah or John is a shortening of Jonah, which is probably true. But elsewhere in the Bible, Jesus refers to his death and resurrection as the sign of Jonah. Is it an innocent coincidence or a play on words?
Whoa, that's deep.
And it gets better. Peter is almost always listed first when in a group, and he alone from the apostles gets his name changed.
Wow, it's clear Peter really held a special place among all the apostles.
Yeah, and that special place is the leader of Jesus' earthly kingdom, the church. I get to carry on this 2,000-year-old tradition instituted by Christ to keep his teachings pure, like protecting a spiritual Gotham City on a global scale. It's a tough and busy job, but they definitely picked the right man for it.
Dang, Batman, how do you do it?
Well, Spider-Man, I guess I'm just the hero the church needs right now. A silent guardian of truth, a watchful protector of my flock, a dark knight.